welcome to the Pacific Islander Health Board's live stream on YouTube and Facebook. I'm Betty, I'm one of the outreach coordinators, and today we're talking about tenant rights with Ms. Violet Lavatai from the Tenants Union of Washington. She's the executive director there, and she is a tenant advocate, and she's going to answer all our questions about what our rights are right now during the pandemic, and things like, are your landlords able to evict you, which they're not. It's one of the first and foremost questions. But Violet, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Betty. And it's important that we get the information out to our communities, what the moratorium and what the tenant rights are. And yeah, but first I wanted to say thank you for saying my name correctly. You know, sometimes who could say Lavatai, you know? So, but I wanted just to give a shout out to our communities. Talafalava. I'm actually a Samoan and been a tenant advocate with the Tenants Union for 6 years. So just wanted to put that out there and wanted to get as much information to our community as possible.
That's so awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing that too, because I feel like the lives that we bring at the Pacific Islander Health Board are really geared to our communities that come from the Pacific Islander background. So a lot of the questions that we ask are questions that we don't actually ask in person, yes, because we're so concerned about what the repercussions would be or what retaliation could look like. So thank you for pointing that out and representing. I'm from Guam, by the way. I probably look like the least Chamorro of the Chamorros. But that's the culture that I know and grew up with, and I'm trying to pass down to my daughters. So now that I'm living here in Seattle, renting has been like the process for me. And so I'm happy to talk with you today.
Yay, okay.
All right, let's see. Well, can you tell us first what the Tenants Union of Washington is?
So our tenant advocates, we're a tenant union, and we actually advocate for tenants' rights. We started in 1977. A group of volunteers got together and started fighting against slumlords, and in 1977, the tenant union was created. So this year will be 44 years that we've been in existence. We push for legislation, more tenant protections. We make sure that you know, everything is equitable. People always ask me, and I put this out there all the time, it's an uncomfortable thing to say, but it's true. Why is there a homeless problem? Well, it's because of racist and discriminatory behaviors that are set up in this system. And that's where we come in. What we're trying to do is make it an even playing field that tenants can live and not struggle. You know, the landlord needs the tenant and the tenant needs the landlord. So
yeah. That's so awesome that this is a very like long-standing organization that has been fighting. Like, it's not a recent thing that we're dealing with. It has history.
Yes, absolutely. And it's for 44 years. We're always going to feel the crunch. You know, gentrification and displacement is happening and is still happening as we speak. And I think that's where we take the cause of the fight up, you know, with tenant protections. You know, the majority of people, and this is a fact, and people always ask me this, African Americans are evicted and has the highest rate of evictions in the state of Washington. And I believe it's in our nation too. There's 7% more likely to get evicted more than a white person or other, you know, and so it's not something that the TU has made up. It's actual facts.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And just so that as our conversation goes, can you explain what gentrification is?
Gentrification is when you're in your community, you have built up your community. Just like me, I grew up in Rainier Avenue, and gentrification is where developers, landlords start to build new buildings, and push. They actually start pushing out people who have established their community there. The rent gets outrageous, and and that's gentrification, displacement, all in
Mhm.
one.
It's so important that you shared and defined that, because I think that sometimes people see it as a positive thing, or there is a community that sees it as a
Yes,
positive thing, but there's a negative
yes.
consequence to that.
Absolutely. It could be beautiful. There's nothing wrong with change, but if it's at the back of a tenant, that's a
Hmm.
problem. And we're talking about majority of the people that feel this is people of color, low income, and people of communities of color. And we want to stop this. And that goes back to everything that we do is, and you hate to say it, but it is the truth. It's all racist and discriminatory behaviors that plays into our world, in housing.
Right. Yes.
So,
And
yeah.
it's such a sad thing to experience personally, and then to see it happen over time is also
Yes.
saddening.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah.
So when the pandemic hit, um, what were some of the concerns that were being brought to your organization by your clients or tenants?
One of the things when the more, when the pandemic hit, as you know, as everyone knows, a lot of people lost their jobs. Now,
Mhm.
if you lose your employment, you're paying your rent. We have more than 1 million renters across the state of Washington, and a lot of them lost their jobs. The first thing is, how am I going to pay the rent? And it was so important that the governor stepped in because of loss of jobs and because of the pandemic, was that he stepped in, and what he did was he actually covered all the tenants who were paying rent um, under this moratorium. And so with the moratorium, you couldn't get evicted. And I think one of the things that everybody thinks is when we say cancel the rent or let's not pay the rent, it's not that. They're not able to pay the rent. A
Mhm.
lot of Yeah, and a lot of calls we were getting was people weren't getting their unemployment because of a lot of people saying, I still can't pay my rent. Even with the unemployment, we're still waiting. I mean, there were people that just received their unemployment in October and November of last year. Now
Mhm.
think about that. For months, you've applied, and there's no money to pay the rent. So those calls were coming in. What do we do? When he first brought up the first moratorium, now the governor has pushed 5 times. This will be his 5th time in December
Wow.
to cover the moratorium. He's extended it every time that, we're always in his ear and
Mhm.
we're around the table saying there will be mass evictions if we don't have this moratorium. So in
Mhm.
December, and at the last minute, December 20th, I think, he extended it to March 31st. Now, we were on pins and needles because it was right before we thought that January 1st there was going to be mass eviction. So
Right.
coming December, he actually extended it to March 31st. Now, we are waiting because advocates all across the state right now are wondering what's going to happen, because here's the thing I think that everybody is waiting for. Under our new president, he's sending out a 1.9 trillion package for to help businesses, to help renters and stuff like that. In that package is going to help a lot of the landlords and the tenants. And so right now we are on pins and needles about what is the governor going to do, because we still haven't received that package. There's going to be mass wave of evictions, and that's what we're trying to do is get funding, asking the governor to protect tenants so he won't see a lot of people. I can tell you this, I would never want to be the governor, but as a
Mhm.
governor and as a person who cares for people, you don't want to see families on the streets, not under your watch. And so I think we're in this place where, last time we went to the governor's mansion, we actually did a call to action and went to his place to extend the moratorium. We did it in December, and we were so happy because he extended
Good.
it to March 31st.
That's awesome. That's really great, and I appreciate organizations like yours that advocate for people who I don't want to say don't know better, but it's because we don't have that education, or
Yes,
it's not in our field of work where we understand. So even the word moratorium, I know I would probably be the person, if I wasn't working for this organization, I would not know that word unless
yes.
someone kept repeating it around me. So what is that, like an order or just
Yes,
document?
the moratorium is, so the moratorium is a proclamation of the governor it's almost like an emergency proclamation to protect people or to help people. And this proclamation was, he knew that the dire need, there wasn't unemployment coming out fast enough. They were having trouble with that, and people were going to be on the streets. So this proclamation, it covers people. Now, a proclamation, eviction, it's called the eviction moratorium. It actually is something that we're going through right now. It's not something that is going to be in the law and anything like that. It's an emergency proclamation that the governor is putting out there. Now, if you rent in a mobile home, if you rent in just say even in transitional housing and you're behind and you are working, it protects everyone, everyone. So not one notice, not one. The only thing you can get evicted from under the moratorium, if you are doing something illegal or hurting your neighbor or something criminal. That's the only way they can actually get you evicted. So
Thank you so much for explaining that, because people will say, oh, I can't get evicted. And then people who don't want to do the research or assume because they don't want to ask because they're good
yes,
at leads, they're gonna be like, oh, we damaged the property in some way, like
yeah,
whatever. We're all indoors with kids and there's bound to be like a hole in the wall somewhere. um, they think that a small thing, property damage, like casual use, like with kids, might be the reason to cause an eviction, or a thing. I'm not finding the words right now, but just a reason for a landlord to say, okay, you're not treating this house with respect, goodbye. But it really is criminal acts or behaviors in the
yes,
home that is
yes.
the eviction rule.
It's only criminal behavior that you can get really evicted from. They call that an emergency, eviction. But other than that, right now, you can't even go into the courts to ask for somebody to be evicted. You have to prove that the police were called and there was a criminal act, somebody got hurt. That's what you call an emergency, eviction.
Mm-hmm.
It's something because it's a criminal act. Other than that, they can't even raise your rent or even actually serve you a notice, period.
That's good to know. And that's also going to be shocking for a lot of folks who are like, I've been behind rent for 3 months and my landlord's asking me, it's the 4th month now, it's the 5th month now, when are you going to get
Yes,
it? And I can only, now that we're slightly back into normalcy, not even, but I can only give you half of rent or a full month of rent. That
yeah. And so some landlords and tenants, I can tell you this, there are some landlords and tenants that have good relationship that are, they're trying to pay as they can. But the bottom line is, Betty, I think everybody at this point can't pay rent. There's nothing coming in. I mean, they can barely feed their family. I mean, I got a call where I had a family, I actually shared resources where the food banks where this was, where they were giving out certain things, toiletries and stuff like that. I think at this point, the landlords know that people cannot pay. It's not just the tenants who's feeling the crunch; it's also the landlords. And I think with this package coming out from the our president, it's going to have a huge amount effect on all of us. The governor just signed in February on February 19th a huge $2.2 billion package that will help the state of Washington. 365 million is going to help in rental assistance and utility assistance. We need that. We need a lot of things, and what they're trying to do is pass the law. Advocates are trying to push legislation that if and when the tenants come out of this, and you know what I mean, and there's funding available to help pay the rent, is not putting an increase without, because they're going to want to charge more. And so advocates are saying to put out, they're trying to pass legislation to put out a plan so that they can pay back, get all this rental assistance to help the landlord and the tenant.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so hopeful for so many families.
Yes.
And I feel like just the burden of stress of thinking of how to pay a bill just compounded with being home in quarantine and not being able to go outside or even like seek other employment because you're still waiting for the one that you're either very in love with or is just one that's convenient for your family. That's good to know.
Yeah, totally. And I think right now we want to cover everything of the moratorium, because a lot of people, I mean, sometimes we get calls and say, the landlord just served me with the notice and said to get out. Mm-hmm. Now, they cannot do that. And that's where we write letters to them, report them to the Attorney General's office. Mm-hmm. He takes complaints. The highest number of desist letters that are going out from the AG's office is to the to the landlords and developers, because they're still trying to get under the moratorium and evict people.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. I use the word amazing in different ways, and then this way it's like, wow, we're all going through something and it's really hard. But I also understand, like, as a business owner, it's really hard, but we're all going through something and we're all human and we need compassion right now. So the eviction moratorium states that you cannot be evicted for being behind on rent. But, if you haven't even paid for rent for the past year, basically you can't be evicted. So there's no deadline until it ends, or if it's extended or assistance is given.
Yes. March 31st of this month, that's when the proclamation ends. Right now, as every advocate in the state of Washington, it's, hey, has the governor said anything? Hey, and so we're waiting for the governor to, here's the thing why we want it extended, because we know a huge package that will help people in our state, it's not here yet. Mm-hmm. And if you extend the moratorium, we're going to see a mass wave of evictions in April. Mm-hmm. What we're asking the governor is to extend it, and when the package to help people and help the landlord and the tenant, with rental assistance and utility assistance, is giving that time, because it's still not here. And the governor signed, he did sign $2.2 billion. And 365 million is going to go for rental assistance and things like that. Mm-hmm. So.
Wow. Okay. So if a tenant has a landlord or property manager who says, hey, in 2 months, if your rent's not due, what's the first thing that they should do?
If they do that, I mean, the first thing is to have an honest conversation. I don't have a job. There is nothing coming in. I wish I could pay you. Having that frank conversation with the landlord. And I think a lot of landlords are angry right now. It's no fault of the tenants either. This is something that's happening across our world. You know what I mean? It's our whole world. And I think at this point, we also, it's not saying, hey, cancel the rent and screw over the landlord. No, what we're asking Congress to do is not cancel the rent, but pay both debts. You know what I mean, for the tenant and the landlord. And that's the thing about cancel the rent. Our our campaign is to always say, um, because we have a way of saying it, it sounds kind of like, cancel the rent.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing is cancel the rent to help both the renter and the landlord. And we're asking Congress, one of the congressmen is trying to push legislation to, combat that. Because
Mm-hmm.
once this come out, the 365 million, it's going to go to help pay a lot of rent. And we're not just talking about rent, we're talking about utilities too.
That's a good point to cover, that it's not just for rent, that it's for
It's not just
everything.
for, it's for everything. And so I think the moratorium right now, because people would not have electricity or not have,
Mm-hmm.
you live in a place where there's no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things, we're hopeful that some of the numbers have come down for COVID,
Mm-hmm.
about that, and people can start going back to work and get their feet. But we want to have a plan in place where it's stressful to go back a year and pay all that rent,
Right.
you know? And so what we're doing is helping legislation to say, okay, let's get rental assistance and get the landlord, help the landlord, the tenant, but also even having some kind of payment plan where the tenant isn't evicted because of COVID.
Right. Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
So first is have a conversation with the landlord or property
Yes.
manager. And then what if that person is not, what if they're either not wanting to acknowledge that there's a moratorium? Like, what do you have to do if they're absolutely just finding a way to clear that unit out?
So I think one of the things is the number one thing, if a tenant, and hear me clearly, if a landlord's coming and says, I want you out by tomorrow, that's illegal. What you do is you either we'll leave our contact information, because after the last Facebook Live, I had to keep up with going after landlords and getting people's money back
Oh.
under, so, contacting us, but also contacting the Attorney General's office. That's the first thing I want you to do. And if they're giving you illegal notices, call us. What
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure is the resources for the Attorney General's office and us, the tenants union, we can help you. We get calls every day about either, the landlord's trying to stick a notice and say, get out. That's illegal,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And here's the thing. I think a lot of landlords, one of the landlords called me the other day. I'm not even kidding. I get calls from landlords too, just to yell. I lose no sleep. But, in his mind, he's like, they don't want to pay the rent. Actually, tenants do want to pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
They do want to pay the rent. They
Mm-hmm.
can't. And I think one of the things is that misconception is getting over. Look at our world. I told the landlord, look at what's happening right now. It's COVID. People lost their jobs. It's no fault of their own that this awful disease that we're all experiencing is upon us. So.
We have a question from YouTube from Jesse. Thanks for joining in. He's asked, I'm assuming I'm sorry. Is there going to be protections on late fees for folks that can't pay off one lump sum and therefore making a payment plan but late fees on top? So we didn't touch on late fees. Our landlords, go ahead. I'll let you take that.
So what we're trying to do is, I'm glad you brought that up, Jesse, because what we're trying to do is actually in this legislation that we're still, call your legislations, you guys, we're always in their faces and stuff to pass these, is when the payment plan comes, that there will not be late fees on top of that. I mean, what we're trying to do is get a payment plan where it works for it, but, having that extra fee on top of not paying the rent, it people go more into debt and it gets more hopeless. People start ending up in their cars on the streets. And so that's the reason why we're pushing legislation not to have those extra late fees, you know?
Good. So is that then something that the the landlord says, okay, I'm not going to give you any late fees, or is that just mandated that there will not be any late fees during this time?
Well, that's why it's nothing mandated now about the late fees. And that's what we're fighting for. Because, listen, at the end of the day, you have the rent to pay on top of the late fees. It actually will make, people will end up on the streets. And what we're trying to do is push and protect tenants from having to pay that extra late fee,
So when this package comes out, where do people go for it? Should they contact you, or is it something they sign up for?
So what we're going to do is, as soon as this package come in and they release the funds, because like I said, the governor already signed into a package of 2.2 billion. Once that is out, what we have to do as community leaders with the health board, get that information, get all the rental assistance out there so people will know where to apply and how to get help. And they even are bringing out, hopefully soon, there's also legal, mediation funding that will be coming out where lawyers can help, lawyers for the state can help tenants by not losing their homes. You know what I mean? Because just imagine 1 million people in court because they couldn't pay their rent. So those are plans that are trying to be in place. There was a question.
It was, where do we go for that package? And I think that was for the aid that's going to be passed out.
Yeah. We're also going to put it on our website. We also want to make sure that all organizations have this information so that their constituent or their clients or the tenants or their people can see this and say, okay, you know what? United Way is still coming out. Let's call them. Or King County has this whole new, rental assistance. Let's call King County. We want to make sure we get the information, the correct information out there.
So I'm glad you brought up King County. There have been private financial assistance given to renters through different organizations. And then do you know of current state or departments that are giving financial assistance, or was that something that they were hoping for if a certain bill or law was passed for families?
Well, all the churches and all the organizations, they're at their max. I mean, people are calling everywhere. And I think, the thing is now waiting for this package to have rental assistance and have even lawyers who will get funding to help mediate some of the court cases that might be coming out of this, and so I think once we get the word out, we're going to put it on our website. I'm asking everybody through this is that we spread the word, getting the financial, once this package hit, we can always go on the governor's website, find out, and then, push it out to everybody who needs it.
Okay. That's good. So it's a Facebook user, and I think sometimes if we don't, so we're streaming on StreamYard, and there's an extra step if you need it, if this is shared in a group for you to populate your photo and name. But this user is asking, a few families have been applying for assistance. They aren't receiving any correspondence or statuses on their applications. Would the next round of assistance be equitable to our islander communities?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that we're seeing the disparities is actually all of this kind of funding that's coming out. The POC people, islanders and everybody are not even in Spokane. They're like, they apply, they say, oh, apply, and they get no call back. a lot of the difficulty, and we want to make sure that we work on, okay, we applied, now why are we jumping through another hoop? That's
Right.
the disparity that we're seeing across our state. And I think one of the questions that we're going to ask legislator, is it hard to apply?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is for POCs, it is for
Mm-hmm.
people of color, to apply to this. Nobody's calling us back. I think we're going to have to answer those questions when once we try to get this package out there and see what are the disparities. Why are not the people of color, the communities of color, not getting this assistance as
Mm-hmm.
fast as the other people are?
Right. I think that I'm glad that you touched on that and that this question was asked, because sometimes, and especially in my family, is even more so when we first moved to Seattle, which for me was 10 years ago. um, I don't get the information until it's passed down so many times before it hits me. So whatever was available probably became available 2 days ago. So what can we do as a community to stay on top of this? Or let's say I live with my mother and or I don't live with her. I'm sorry. So if she has her own space and she needs help and she's in this position, what is the best way for me as her advocate to bring that information to her, or where do I stay on top of things?
That's the thing. A lot of the kids are helping their parents because of, English is their second language. I've seen a lot of I mean, one Samoan lady called me and she actually didn't know I was Samoan. She just knew my name was Violet. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I can talk to her in Samoan. I just think all of the kids and any way that we can. It's interesting that a lot of our elder generation is going on Facebook. I'm not even kidding you. Yes. And so those are the kind of things, is because Samoans are family oriented. Our
Mm-hmm.
Polynesian groups are family oriented. Is getting that information,
Mm-hmm.
having those community leaders really share with their community, the churches. I sometimes reach out to the ministers, the elders of church communities, and get the word out that way. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we always have to, because if your family doesn't know, you won't get the help. And I think
Right.
that's a good question you brought up, is making sure our communities are getting this information.
Right. And I appreciate all the organizations that are very like specifically supporting our Pacific Islander community. And
Yes,
so if you're watching right now on YouTube or Facebook, um, please like and subscribe on YouTube, and then follow us on Facebook and keep that notification on, because we post, things like this event that are a few days notice or a week notice or however many times, but we often will just post whatever our partner organizations have available that day, whether it's talking about the vaccine appointments that are available, food drives, or so now going forward, if there's an update on tenant rights or financial
yes,
aid assistance, it's just going to go out there with contact information. And that's, I think, one of the, I'm saying most accessible because it's easy to share on social, but also it's just there for us to return to without having to figure out which government agency or department is
yes,
actually officially saying your aid is here. Here's the link. So if you're
yeah,
watching, please share this page, because we are really covering all of our islands and our families.
yeah. And I think this goes out to everyone, whether you're the Somali Health Board and things like that, is getting the information to the people. And I think that's the one thing. If you don't know what your rights are, if you don't know there's resources,
Hmm.
you'll never receive it. I mean, I get calls after the fact that they're already out of their place, and the landlord just did such awful things to them and they left. Before you leave, try to reach out to us. I mean, um, we've had many successful cases, whether it be like landlords. oh hey, you need to get out by next week, March 1st, or February 28th would be your last day. Well, you can't. That's illegal.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. I mean, right now the moratorium is something that we're waiting for the governor to maybe extend past March 31st. We haven't heard anything. So,
Mhm.
fingers crossed that he will extend it past March 31st.
Yeah. I'm hoping because I can't believe that it's already March 1st, so that's
I know.
30 days from now. And I'm very lucky that the home we're living in is actually the same. It's the first rental home that we've had since our family moved in. And so we have a really great relationship with our landlord. And I cannot imagine, I mean, I've lived in apartments during my time while I'm here, and I cannot imagine being in a building and having, you know, to worry about that every time I pass the leasing office.
Yes.
That I would take the back way to go to my unit if that was the case, because it's so, I feel like in our cultures, we're such a uh like you have my word kind of people, where we sign that lease, this is due, we know it's due, but when we can't, it doesn't just, it's not something that like, oh, we're moving on. It really does affect our mental
It
health
does.
and physically make you sick sometimes, just
It
thinking
does.
about how to make ends meet.
Yeah. And I think everybody has to look at the thing that I want to pay my rent. I don't
Hmm.
want to get evicted. You feel bad. There's a lot of tenants who are feeling bad. I feel bad for them because this is no fault of their own. They've lost everything. There's no way to pay the rent. And we get families with little ones, like, what are we going to do? The stress level of that, mostly in our culture, is saying, man, I just want to pay this. I want to
Hmm.
do right by them, and I get it. It's a stressful time, mostly when you have, because Polynesians are very family oriented.
Hmm.
Sometimes you have like 3, 4 generations living in the same house.
Right. Right.
So,
Same here. Same with
yeah.
our family. What's great about it, though, is that if we do get information that is able to help us out of a funk, or like um, with assistance that's coming, it only takes like 1 or 2 messages to get to 100 people.
Yeah.
Um, so as we're talking about, I'm like, all these memories are coming back and really thinking like, man, if I was still living in that building, there are only 2 entrances, and I always took the closest one, which would pass the leasing office. I don't know if I would even bring up a need for repair, or I would feel bad asking to say my second bathroom toilet isn't
Is not
functioning
working.
properly. Like, how can we encourage our community to still ask for the rights that we have to have a functioning unit, even if we're behind on rent?
It's a hard question. I mean, everybody, I think everybody where you're from, you're like, okay, I haven't paid the rent for months, but I
Mm-hmm.
need this fixed. The toilet isn't working. The thing is, under the state law, even with the moratorium protecting you, under the state law, it is your right to ask for repairs. I mean, I know some of the people will say, I'm not going to say anything. We're just going to have to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to put in a repair request. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I say that is because you're actually overseeing, even if, you're behind on rent, you actually are overseeing that property because you're living in it and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that things are working, you know. And I always encourage the tenants, please put in your repair request.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is, what is a repair request? What is the time frame for everything like that? That was one of the questions. For water and for hot water and for electricity, it's 24 hours. But
Mm-hmm.
under the state law, now here's the catch. But for an act of God, like um, maybe an earthquake or
Disaster.
tornado, sometimes that doesn't happen. But you're right, as a tenant, hot water and electricity is within a 24-hour period. You have to notify them that you cannot go without electricity
Mm-hmm.
and without the hot water. That's the law. Now, if you're asking for repairs like your refrigerator, we get calls about the refrigerator sometimes, when it goes on the blink and they
Mm-hmm.
got food in there.
Mm-hmm.
I always say this because the laws are, I'm always wanting them to put, and the food, if it goes
Right.
bad, there is no law like that. But they have 72 hours to respond to the tenant about fixing the repair of the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that you have to work out with your landlord, but the landlord, there's no law that the landlord is responsible for the food. Now, you got good landlords out there that has given the tenant money back for,
Oh,
the loss of food. So, yeah.
wow. Okay, so that's really helpful to know because I I know when I share my experiences, if my family members they're like, we already know who you're talking about.
They're going like,
Like, I'll be like
okay.
specific on certain instances or examples, but that is really helpful because if you're in a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment and one of those for some reason isn't working properly, then you still can say, hey, 24 hours, I need hot water in
Yes.
my the second bathroom, because our family of 6 cannot just shower. I mean, I also know that saying a family of 6 cannot shower in one bathroom is
Yeah.
being very privileged in saying it, but at the same time, if that is the right for it to be fixed, then your second bathroom without the hot water or electricity should have hot water and electricity repaired within
Yes.
24 hours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, I'm not going to say anything.
Right.
I encourage tenants to actually request repairs to get it fixed, to
Mm-hmm.
keep it running. Because at the end of the day, if you choose to leave that unit and you never reported that repair that needed to be done, they
Mm-hmm.
might charge you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's best that um, that you report the repairs, even if you're behind rent. You need to get things fixed in there. So
That's
yeah.
great. And then leads me to ask, well, let me see. So I encourage tenants to get repairs. Yes. I'm trying to look at some of the comments that we had. But I was also going to ask, since you were talking about when we leave the unit, so outside of the moratorium, can we touch on some of the tenant rights that we have,
Yes.
even outside of the eviction stuff? What are things that people are typically charged for that they shouldn't be charged for? Or what are things that we are told we have to do before we leave a unit that we really don't have to take care of?
So one of the things is there's a law. It's called normal wear and tear under the laws when it comes to the security deposit. Now, normal wear and tear is a worn out rug, or chips, painting that is kind of chips. It's that's what you call normal wear and tear. Now, landlords I can tell you this because we get calls on it. We have to go after landlords to get the security deposit back. It's money that is yours, that belongs to the tenant. It's money that is there that should be put in escrow. The
Mm-hmm.
tenant can even request it, that they seen it's put in escrow. That money is, so when the tenant leaves the premises or their tenancy, they've ended their tenancy, that is for damages. And the thing is, always read your lease because sometimes they'll sneak in, oh, you automatically, even if you clean the place like you can eat off the floor, they still will put all kinds of stuff. So you always have to read your lease. I know a lot of people say, I just sign it and get over it and get,
Mm-hmm.
and just walk out. I really encourage now people to read their lease because there's some things in there, like we've caught landlords putting in tenants are responsible for repair, which is illegal, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and tenant will will not be able to get the security deposit back, which is illegal. And those are the illegal language. There's also a law that protects tenants that says those illegal things. If
Mhm.
you're not, if you're not actually really sure about the laws, I want you to put in the chat Northwest Justice Project. They're a group of attorneys who advocate for people, and they're really really good. They're a good group of they're a good organization. They help a lot of tenants and stuff like that. They bring out they keep on top of the laws and things like that. They also have a hotline which is clear hotline. When you go on our website, you'll see a list of the legal services. Now these legal services are income qualified. They were created for really low income tenants, people on Section 8 and things like that. So we have a list of the legal sources they can refer to.
Nice.
But now for the security deposit, it is one of those things where the landlord actually think he can get rich off of it's actually a thing where they do, the landlords, where they get together and they have these workshops. I'm not even making this up. How to keep the tenant's money, the security deposit. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
So what you have to do is you look at your security deposit. If you move out on the 28th of February, then you count the next day, March 1st, 21 days. They have 21 days. Now, I always encourage the tenants, leave a forwarding address, please. Do not just say, send it to me and expect you will get it. You have to give a forwarding address. From the 21 days, they have that time frame to say what they're doing with your security deposit, what they're paying for, and things like that. And we encourage you to make sure you count the days. If it's over 21 days and you haven't received anything and you've given them, they have to give you in full your whole security deposit back, every penny. So if it was 1,500 and they went over the 21 days, you get
Mhm.
a full $1,500 back.
I'm just smiling because I'm laughing also. It's all the security deposit.
Yeah, the tenants I talk to, they go, "What? Really?" Things like that. I'm not even kidding you. I'll be like, "Yeah, you know what? It's okay. I'm gonna share with you your tenant right."
I'm one of them. I mean, I'm not saying one of them, but I am. I'm one of the community members whose family wasn't in the real estate world or property management world to share this information. So I definitely never came back with my full security deposit. And so now I'm like, oh, but I will say that when you're needing a place, sometimes when you sign that lease, it's like,
Yes.
this is the only place that's going to take me with my credit, with how much I can make or afford. And so I'm going to sign it because it says that there. And I don't know if it's just my family and myself or if it's our culture coming from the islands. It's like, honestly, sometimes things on paper is so authority, like that's it because
Yeah.
it's in black and white. And so we don't question it. Or I was raised to not question what was written in black and white and ask you to sign down here that there's no way to appeal or ask for a revision on whatever's presented
Yeah.
to you. Because I think sometimes also we're just told not to ask, not to
Yeah.
ask, just do. Um, so that's really, really important. Thank you for sharing that because not very many people will think to ask about a lease agreement that says, oh, at the end, I'm gonna charge you $30 for a light bulb.
Yeah, for a light bulb. Oh, and by the way, I saw a little spot on the oven. It'll cost you
Mm-hmm.
$500.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. This is the reality. It's true. They will listen. You give them money. What they don't want to do is give you money.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, and think about your lease. You're like, okay, I'm not gonna ask any questions. This is the best I can do. I'm going to sign it.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage everybody. I know there's desperate times where, listen, I've been there, done that. I have to be truthful too. Like, okay, I never read my lease before, but I do now. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I read the lease, not to make it so traumatizing for me, I do, I do it so it protects me,
Mm-hmm.
protects my family. I'm always encouraging Pacific Islanders and our communities
Mm-hmm.
of low income and communities of color read the lease, because in the lease there will be sometimes bad landlords will stick it in there. They're like, they count on people like us to not read the lease. Like,
Right.
all right,
Right.
well, it's in there. They don't know what their rights are. And I think that's a misconception now, where it's good that the tenants union exist,
Right.
because tenants are like, what? They can't do that? Yeah, they can't do that. And so we want to spread the word about that. And so make sure, if you have your security deposit, you know what your rights are. If you don't know what your rights are, call the tenants union. We have a hotline that goes on from Monday through Friday. We're there to ask questions. We've had overwhelming calls that come in, but I see that Mia has sent what happens, and this is the biggest question. This is the big question. What happens when the moratorium ends?
Mm-hmm.
So on March 31st, that's when the moratorium is supposed to be lifted. Well, we're hoping right before the moratorium it's extended a few months. But what happens? I think the thing is, tenants are like, what's going to happen to us not paying the rent? And we're hoping and pushing for legislation to get this funding to say we can pay this back. Well, there's some resources we can ask for. We can pay this, and that's what's going to happen. And what we're going to do is, near the end of March 31st, is really get out in the community and say, this is what, hopefully the governor extends it maybe a couple or 3 more months.
Mm-hmm.
The landlords are suing the governor right now, but under his watch, he doesn't want to see families on the street.
Right.
I don't either. None of us do. None of us do. And so what what will happen is, if it's not extended, hopefully the funding that we can, that they're bringing out from the 365, because it's not just rental assistance, it's
Mm-hmm.
utility and all of other things, childcare and things like that, is
Mm-hmm.
really trying to get the the our state back into the working mode.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully this helps with the checks, amount of checks. People with children that will receive this will have extra money for their children.
Mm-hmm.
If Samoans have 8 kids, well, they're gonna get some money. I
Mm-hmm.
hope that every family that has kids and stuff will get this money from this package coming out, so it help them. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people are in dire straits right now. And so the moratorium ends on March 31st, and we're geared up. We were stressed out in December. Now we're
I
stressed out again in
It's a cycle. It really is a cycle. And I feel like, advocacy work never ends. Even when
March.
you reach one milestone or one triumph, there's always something else to now work on. And it makes me sad to have to ask, but if that package isn't for some reason given out, what can people do?
We gotta flood the legislation. We gotta call the governor. I think what everybody does is, well, they can do that. I think when every voice is heard,
Mhm.
ask us. We're going to put the numbers up there. You call them. And the people think that, well, my voice doesn't matter. It actually does.
Right.
It actually does. If you call your legislation like, hey, it's hard for me to get this rental assistance. Why is it a person of color or a Samoan woman? It's hard for me I've applied, put my paperwork in. How come nobody's calling me back? There's nobody answering the phone. That was the hugest complaint from POCs who are feeling the crunch and trying to get rental assistance. No one was calling them back. There was a busy number. For days, it would just ring. So
Yep.
why are you inexistent? And we gotta get elected officials to look into this, to not make it hard for POCs or low income communities of color to apply to something that should help them. You know, don't let me preach.
I will actually because I feel we need more of that. We need more people to say our voices count. Our one phone call does. And I know I come from, my family is very much like, oh, you know, our one voice doesn't count. But if there is 30 of us that can get together, it's not 30 calls to a lawmaker, one of our senators,
Yes.
to hear us and say that those 30 voices come from one big family, and our families go across how many different counties in the states.
Yes. Yes. My first time I ever called elected official, I said, "Hi, my name is Violet Lavatai. You represent me in the district. I'm hoping that you will support this legislation." I mean, I was so happy because I got an email back, and that's the thing. Every voice counts. You know what I mean? Everybody's voice counts. And I think here's the world I want to see. I want our Samoan community to engage more in helping our community more. You know, the Pacific Islanders, they love family stuff, barbecue and stuff like this. Things like this that matter to us, that our community, to establish and build up our community, is getting involved. Calling your legislation, saying, "Hey, this is not right," you know, and you're representing me. And it goes a long way. It does.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we have the tenantsunion.org website there and their phone numbers for us to share. If you're watching this either right now during the live or during the replay, please share it with your family and friends in Washington and even outside of Washington, because I'm sure that if we share it in one other state, they have tons of family members here in the Northwest.
Yes.
Each of our voices count. And so thank you for putting that there. And then follow the Tenants Union of Washington. You guys are on Instagram. You guys are on Facebook. Their website, we posted it. Stay on top of it. What's your first stream to message people? Do you guys, is it an email list that people should sign up for to get that information, or what do you guys do?
Go on our website, fill in the email, call us, we'll email you and make sure that anything that has to do with legislation that or the package or anything like that, we're going to put it on our website. Our website it gets a lot of, because we're Tenants Right group, we get a lot of traffic on our website. So we will put the links on there. There's even the laws and things on there of your rights as a tenant. You can navigate. We got a lot of things. We also got resources on there that you can look up and call and things like that. And mostly with the legal help, if you're income qualified. Now, if you're rich and you try to call the lawyers, you're going to have to hire a lawyer on your own.
We're going to ask you to be a donor.
Yeah. You shouldn't be calling that service, it's for the poor people. So
that's so awesome. But it's also, a very true fact is that sometimes we're just on that borderline of needing the assistance. So even if you feel like you might make too much, call and ask if you qualify. That's the biggest thing that I just wish more people would do, is just ask first. And if you do not qualify, it's okay. Share that information with someone who does, or find a way to, make that work for you, because you still need that service. It's not a reason to be deterred by it.
Yeah. After that last time we did with working with, Pacific Island Health Board, we had families who called me. I mean, when I put out my number, I was getting calls the next day. I was like, "Wait, what? They took your security deposit?" All right, hold on. Let me let me get your name and number. But those are the kind of things that we like doing, is trying to help people more. You know what I mean? This,
Mhm.
for the tenant union, it's not just a job for me. It's
Mhm.
actually something that I feel I'm called to do, is to help more tenants across our state. So
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, thank you so much, Violet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. The Pacific Islander Health Board is going to be sharing more of our partner organizations who are helping our community members, especially coming from like a culturally conscious
yeah,
background. We know these questions that they're questions that everybody has, but they're also very hard questions that our own people have difficulty
yes,
expressing outside of our homes. Especially if we just moved to the States or aren't used to being vocal. And I find myself now being a little bit more vocal than I usually am. So um, I'm very thankful for you having that place at the Tenants Union. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise and knowledge with us today.
yeah, you're welcome. And if we hear anything, if it's extended past March 31st, we're going to be the first ones to reach out to you guys and just spread the word that, hopefully it gets extended, the moratorium.
Awesome. I'm hoping that happens for us too. Thank you so
Yes,
much, Violet. I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Well, you're
Bye.
welcome. You're welcome. Bye.